Hello again, everybody. A quick reintroduction. My name is Vesna. On Wednesday, I presented my opening position regarding harm reduction as a requisite health service. Today, I will be presenting my rebuttal to my opposition's arguments. Before we begin, I would like to go over the agenda for this presentation. I will first give us an overview of the opposing arguments. I will then present counter-arguments for each of my opponent's arguments. I will close off by discussing the consequences of supporting my opponent's arguments. So, the opposition claims that harm reduction should not be a mandatory service on the presumed grounds that it is not universal, it is not cost effective, does not solve root causes, and that it is not ethically stable. So, on the argument of harm reduction and universality, the opposition claims that requisite health services should be applicable to all, not a subset of Canadians. However, it is well known that this position has led certain groups, also known as vulnerable populations, to continue to fall through the cracks of our healthcare system. When we fail to ensure equitable opportunities to meet health needs, we support the narratives that trap vulnerable populations, including those who use substances, in substandard qualities of health and life. Harm reduction is more than a provision of opioid alternatives and syringes. Harm reduction is a foundational access point for Canadians with substance use to be participants in their health. Anyone, anywhere can be affected by substance use. Their exclusion health services will affect not only them, but also their children, parents, family members, friends, neighbors, employers, amongst any other members in their social environments. Hence, excluding harm reduction from the status of a requisite health service fails to account for the prevalence of substance use in communities across Canada, enabling gaps in healthcare services to deepen. On the argument of harm reduction and cost effectiveness, the opposition claims that harm reduction programs have mixed effectiveness, comparing urban and rural program implementation outcomes. However, limiting the effectiveness of harm reduction to the results of some community harm reduction initiatives that underperformed paints a false picture. Harm Reduction International provided a briefing of the findings of health economists or economists surrounding harm reduction initiatives. So, between 2000 and 2009, Australia's needle and syringe programs saved 4 Australian dollars for every dollar invested in these programs. Vancouver's safe consumption site, Insight, saves the healthcare system and associated sectors $6 million per year. In Baltimore, investing 1.8 million US dollars for safe consumption sites led to $7.8 million in savings. Hence, the savings enabled through harm reduction efforts continue to stand as cost effective. On the argument of harm reduction and ethical/political stability. So, the opposition claims that the divided public opinion of harm reduction programs and their long-term effects warrants its exclusion. Freedom of discrimination is a human right. We know that participation is a human right. We also know that access to necessary services to preserve one's health and well-being is a human right. Therefore, not investing in harm reduction due to the fear of public opinion and political scapegoating is a silent act of discrimination that conforms with ill-informed public understanding of substance use and recovery. People who use substances have a right and dignity to participate in their health. Hence, harm reduction maintains ethical stability by supporting human rights. On the argument of harm reduction and solving root causes, the opposition claims that budgets are finite and that programs should address root causes. There is continued evidence that harm reduction results in a multitude of savings that can be invested in addressing the conditions that enable substance use. Root causes to substance use can include limited access to health care, social determinants of health, mental health issues, as well as poor health literacy. The harm reduction collaboration framework can encourage the participation of people who use substances and their communities to generate solutions to policy, systems, and the environment. Hence, harm reduction facilitates authentic partnerships to target immediate risks as well as mitigate root causes. In summary, the consequences of not supporting harm reduction as a mandatory health service enables vulnerable groups to continue to fall through the cracks of the healthcare system. It also increases spending across sectors for things such as healthcare, the justice system, and lost productivity in the context of unmanaged substance use. It also supports the narrative of select human rights. And finally, it limits genuine progress in addressing root causes to substance use. The bottom line is that harm reduction is a mandatory health service, and that harm reduction is life saving, morbidity reducing, humane, and evolving. Thank you for your attention. I hope to hear and respond to your questions and comments, and I will see you on Tuesday when I present my closing arguments. Have a wonderful day.